We are live on all the social medias. If you're watching, thanks for watching. If you're not watching, you can listen later. I'm toying around with different camera angles, and I got new glasses, by the way. So we'll see how those go. I don't know. I think they actually make me look older. But anywho, I got new glasses. I'm messing around with new camera angles. I've got this behind me so you can't see that I'm in a bedroom instead of my old studio. So I'm just experimenting with a lot of new stuff. So I'm pretty stoked to try stuff out. I think I got the sound pretty close to where I want it, and I haven't had anything break on me lately. So been a good couple weeks. This week is my Carl Sobel episode. He is one of my Michigan comic friends that I am collecting Michigan comics. I'm going to see how many Michigan comics I can get on the podcast and start doing demographics on how many of those I have. I think I've done like five out of 89 episodes so far. So yeah, Carl is a great episode and somebody who doesn't wait for comedy shows to happen. He makes them happen. So it's a really good one, and it's out there on all the stuff as of today. And what else do I have to announce? Oh, I didn't make a thing for this, but just between you and me, I'm trying to get Postmates, which is like the original delivery app, to be a permanent sponsor. I'm doing like a trial run of 3 episodes, and if you download the Postmates app and put the code BITS into the promo thing, BITS, you get 50% off your first 5 orders of $50 or more. And the max you get off is $100. So if you order $200 worth of stuff, you get it for $100. And if you order 50, you get it for 25. So if you really like me, if you like the show, just download the stupid app and put the code in, and that counts as me doing something. So you don't even have to order anything. I mean, I'm ordering stuff because Uber bought them, and it's basically the same thing as Uber Eats, except for they've got it like Walgreens and 7-Eleven as part of it. So Postmates, download the Postmates app and put the code BITS in. And if you do it, tell me so I can say thanks. Let's get on with this, all right? Oh, I've got too many Word documents up. Okay, so tonight I've got a comedian from Denver. So Mo Vida's start in stand up came after tragedy. After a great start in New York, she moved to Denver to take care of her mom and is now traveling the country, featuring, headlining, and producing shows. And I mispronounced her name when I started. It's Mo Vida, not Vida. So let's bring Mo Vida out right now. Hi, Mo.
Hi.
I'm going to move you over here. Thanks for doing the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm
So,
excited.
so one of the things I haven't done as of late is talk about origin stories, like a Marvel thing. So I wanted because yours sounds kind of interesting, maybe sad, maybe a sad start to it, but kind of
I'm over
interest.
it.
Yeah, it was a while back. So I wanted to talk about how you got started. Can you go into that for me?
Sure. As you can imagine, as comics, we get that question all the time, right? How did you
Yeah.
get started? How did you get into comedy? And so many people say, like, oh, I've always wanted to do it. I never thought I would do comedy.
Mm,
My dad died in 2009. I was
mm,
living in New York City, and that was the height of the financial crisis. I'm an only child. And I had, obviously talked to my mom and asked her, do you want me to move back to Denver, which is where I'm originally from? And she said, don't move back if, like, don't quit your job, right?
mm.
And so I thought, okay, but it dawned on me, I was like, oh, I might not always be in New York. And New York is such a special town.
Mhm.
I wanted to do something that I felt was kind of New Yorky, that I would regret not doing. And
Uh-huh.
I was like, well, I'm not running the marathon. That's for damn sure. um, So I ended up signing up for this 1-day workshop, and it was a comedy writing workshop. And I had taken different ones. Taken like poetry and all this different stuff. But
Mhm.
the instructor had told us that they did a 10-week course, and that culminates with you having to actually perform at the end of it. And I thought, well, that sounds horrifying.
Uh-huh.
Um, but as an homage to my father, who no longer can do anything, I'm going to suck it up and I'm going to do this. And then,
Mm.
we started going to open mics to prepare. And I think part of it was also in my mind, I thought it was like a very dog eat dog world and unkind and just, I had some kind of reservations. And I
Mhm.
found the community to be really lovely. And I
Mhm.
found the process to be really compelling. And I kind of fell in love with it. And I did it, for a long time. I would even tell people, I'm like, oh, I'm not really a comic. And somebody once just like
Yeah.
elbowed me and said, do you get up there? Do you tell jokes? Do you stand on stage? I mean, I don't know what you think that being a comic means. And then I started to actually get better, and people
Mhm.
laughed, and they weren't the friends that I would bring to the shows. They were strangers, and I thought, oh, I think I'm doing this.
Yeah.
I think I'm a comic now.
That's the best feeling when somebody you don't know laughs and you
Yeah.
know it's real. That's the first time I had that happen. That was the coolest thing. So thinking about the class that you took, what I mean you came into it, totally green. I mean, you hadn't even thought about doing comedy. What did the class do to make you feel like you were more ready to get up and do an act?
Scared me. I think
Okay.
it I mean, I know that sounds dumb, but I think that's what it was. I was older when I started, so
Mhm,
I wasn't a kid. I was already in my 30s. I had a career going, I had an MBA. And I think it scared me. It
mhm,
really was so different than anything I was doing, anything I thought about doing. And I kind of found comfort in and felt I thought it was a, I don't know, it just made me feel more vibrant.
mhm.
Um, and yeah, it scared me, and I wanted to do it.
What was your first material about?
Um, Probably the same stuff it's still about, which is just my life, dating, family, my background being
Mhm.
Hungarian, you know, and when you live in New York City, jokes write themselves
Yeah.
a lot of times. So, but it was funny because I somewhere, I don't know where, there was a video of my first performance. I actually had two. No. He let me do two shows, and God, it's just cringeworthy. It's so I'm so uncomfortable. I memorized everything verbatim. I
Yeah.
was just autopilot, terrified. So
You really have to do that, though. I think
yeah,
everybody that is somewhat serious about comedy, and if you take a 10-week course and you pay for it, then you're somewhat serious about it. That first time is just you trying to get the words and say
yeah,
them in order, and sometimes when I go up, it's still like that because I
yeah,
wasn't even thinking about it before I got up there, and you're just trying to make sure that everything comes out, and it's interesting how you can look back at that and immediately say, okay, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to be better and be more in the moment and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's really it's good that you record those first things, and I did the same thing. And it's always good to look back when you have a shitty night and say, well, at least I'm not that bad.
yeah. But I mean, you probably felt this way. We For my day job, I talk all the time.
Hmm.
Um, but when you write a joke, you really have an appreciation for every single word,
Hmm.
because you and I both know you can write a funny joke, and if you don't say a certain word or say it a certain way, it won't land.
Mhm.
And so I think that's why I started off by like memorizing it verbatim.
Mhm.
And now I'm, at a point where I kind of can play with it. I don't, unless I'm doing a longer show, I don't typically write out a set list anymore.
Mhm.
Because I like to just I don't like to do the same set over and over.
Right.
So, but yeah, it really gave me an appreciation for words. And also, I mean, you hear people say like, "Oh, I should do comedy because my coworkers think I'm funny, or
Yeah.
I'm the funny one of my friends." And I'm like, that's all well and good, but some of the best comics are actually complete introverts. Some of them are
Uh-huh.
even assholes,
Yeah.
but they're phenomenal writers, and and that's why they're successful. So I'm like, you don't have to be the funny person at work. In fact, a
No.
lot of times you're probably not going to be a good comic.
Yeah, yeah, you're spot on. The
Yeah.
most comics that I know are pretty introverted, but they are also very smart and
Yeah.
very good at writing, and really, and one of the things that I think is almost an advantage of starting a little bit later than when you're like 20 or whatever, is that you've got some life experience, and when you get up there, okay, the worst thing in your life has already happened to you. You lost your
Yeah,
dad.
and by that point, yeah, I've been through 9/11. I went through a terrible divorce. I,
Yeah.
lost jobs. I was in the midst of the financial crisis. Like, I don't give a shit that you didn't laugh. Sorry, I don't know if we can curse, but
Right.
I don't
Yeah,
care
yeah,
if, you know, you're not going
yeah.
to laugh at a joke.
Right. Yeah, and that's after you've lived some life, it just makes the whole, okay, well, I bombed, so big deal. I'll just learn from it, getting better. And if I was to do the same thing when I was young, 20, go up there and bomb, I probably would never do it again because
Yeah,
it's
sure.
you got ego. You think it's the worst thing in the world that you bombed and all that kind of stuff. But so when so you do the course, you do mics and things like that. When did you start getting serious about being a stand-up?
Uh, it actually took me a few years to
Mhm.
to really. I was always going regularly, so it wasn't that I wasn't serious in that way. Um, I think it was just more in my own head. I think it was probably, I don't know, maybe like even 3 or 4 years in
Mhm.
where I started to think about not only doing stand up, but the career trajectory, right?
Mhm.
Because that's when you first start, you're just worried about, I mean, 5 minutes is horrifying,
Yeah.
right? You go to an open mic, you're like, and that's another thing, your appreciation for time changes.
Yeah.
Because 5 minutes, you're like, oh, that's nothing. And
Yeah.
then when you have no jokes to fill in, it's you're like, oh. But I think it was pivotal points, where I started working at a comedy club in New York and helping out a producer and stuff, where I started to really look at it as, not only what do I want to do next, as if you will, but how do I want to move on in this career. I
Mhm.
still have a day job, but how do you move on in the business of, and not just simply get better at telling jokes? You kind of have to do both,
Mhm.
in my opinion.
Right. Right. I agree there for sure. Now, when you decided, okay, this is gonna be serious. This is maybe not my first income, but it's gonna be my second income, and I want to do it right. What steps did you take to say, okay, I'm a comedian now?
So I started to, you know, produce shows, run open mics. As I mentioned, I was working with a producer in New York, so I could kind of start to understand the business of it. And I mean, it's stuff that nobody thinks about. Like before you do it, you don't think about how do you seat a room
Hmm.
because that is critical.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that, and so I started to take those steps. I, started to, well, not started to, but fortunately, I was getting opportunities to get booked on different types of things. So I was saying yes to whatever I could, because the other thing I wanted was to, do my material in front of different crowds, different places. Um, and when you bomb, the thing is, that's how you evolve. We don't
Mhm.
generally evolve um, unless we bomb,
Right, right. Now your
you know?
persona is I thought it was interesting. I looked at a lot of tape. I looked at a lot of YouTube and
Oh,
things like
God.
that. But the persona that I'm getting from you is I mean you talk about the cougar stuff and drinking and stuff like that, but it all comes back around to what you said, your who you are, your family and all that kind of stuff. So it's almost like you break the ice by you know letting everybody know you're single and that
Yeah.
you're ready to mingle and you the only reason you don't have your drink up there is because you're hoping it gets roofied and all that kind of stuff. So um I thought
I'm not
I thought
hoping it gets roofied. I'm just
yeah.
saying, if you
It's
roofie
okay.
it, you're flirting.
Well, but I like how you do that because if a lot of folks they would get into the whole cougar thing, think about different personas out there that people just get totally stuck like Larry the Cable Guy. He's totally stuck being Larry the Cable Guy. So you go
Right.
into that and then you evolve during your set, and yet it doesn't feel like it's like two separate sets. I guess that's what I liked about what you
Thank
were
you.
doing is that you can do that stuff that's kind of silly and kind of off the wall, and then get into the stories and observations without, I guess, not going totally over the top on any of it, and
Hmm.
covering all of it and making it gel together in one cohesive bit.
Yeah, and
Does that make
basically that
sense?
that gel is I'm a hot mess.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Right.
I mean, that's wonderful to hear, because I am a whole person and I want to be a whole person on stage. Um, it. I mean, to say it's a persona, it's an embellishment of who I
Mhm.
am, but
Right.
it all comes from very real stuff. And when I talk about being a cougar, by the way, I mentioned how society has handed me that label.
Yeah.
I'm tired. I
Right,
just
yeah.
want to go home. I just want to take a nap. And it is. I think for people who get me, they understand that while I am, to use your word, being silly up there, and obviously, I want people to walk away and feel like they had a good time while I was on stage, I am trying to portray, um, being a woman who is middle aged, a woman who I hope younger women can look up to,
Mhm.
not as a, on a pedestal or she did it right, but more like, even though she's messed up stuff in her life or she's had this or that happen, um, it's okay. Like that's what it is. I don't want them to look up to me like I'm perfect. I want them to
Mhm.
be able to look, not, you know what? I won't say look up to me. I want them to be able to see me and see it as looking forward,
Right.
right? Um, I think a lot of people in their 20s have a tremendous amount of pressure on them now more so than ever. And I just
Mhm.
want to be that voice that's like, you know what, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
all going to be okay. And let's just laugh at it. So, and I like it when after shows I have women my age come up and they say, hey, it's so nice and refreshing to hear somebody, who has our voice. But I also
Mhm.
get younger women coming up to me like, oh, you're a spirit animal. Like, you need better parents. No. Yeah, so, but I cover, look, I write from my life. People say,
Mhm.
well, sit down and some people are very observational, they do one-liners. I genuinely just write for my life and what's happened to
Mhm.
me.
It's funny, I'm taking a class, it's an online class, but it's a 10-week class just like yours,
There you go.
and one of the things that the instructor said was, if you are doing a something personal, if you were doing something that seems like it's out of your life, if there isn't a root and truth in it, then it's not gonna come off very well because you're not invested in it all. And we know that when we write jokes, we, like you said, we embellish a little bit. We color it up a little bit because whatever happened was kind of funny or kind of
Right.
stupid or kind of tragic, but we color it up because it makes it funnier, but it's all rooted in something that actually happened. And when I
Right.
watch you, I never thought there was anything disingenuous. It always felt to me like, okay, this is a day in the life, and
Yeah.
it's it, that's what I liked about it, because it was unique in the fact that you've got kind of a different start than the end of it, and I really liked how you juggled that.
Mhm.
And that's why I wanted you on the show, because it is different, and it's something, your humor isn't anything that anybody else could steal because it is so personal.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate all those words because I try to make it relatable. I think my next step is to just go that next level with it.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like I'm kind of sitting in a safe space right
Mhm.
now.
Yeah.
But that could be because I'm doing shows and I'm very fortunate that they're great audiences and they're pretty responsive. But I would like to write stronger jokes and better jokes and just ones that pack a little bit more punch. But at the same time,
Mhm.
I really value being relatable, um, and just I also don't want to like some people say I'm a dirty comic, and I'm like, I'm not a
Mhm.
dirty comic. I'm an
Mm.
adult comic who
Yeah.
talks about adult things. I do use adult language, but not superfluously, not for shock
Mm-mm.
value. I don't use
Yeah.
bad words. Instead of saying and or I use the F bomb. Like I think that's unfair to say that
Mhm.
I'm not a clean comic. That's true, but I
Right.
think it discounts um, what I'm doing up there, candidly.
Right. And
So
that's one of the things that it bothers me that they have made such a clear separation between dirty and clean. Because clean has to be pretty much G rated, and dirty, if you say fuck one time, you're a dirty
yeah,
comic. And there is an in between, and I've always
sure.
wanted to skirt into that in between because I'm a clean comic, and I've always wanted to skirt because in my real life, if I'm being genuine on stage, I say fuck like every sentence. When I type a text to my wife, if I type the letter F, fuck is auto
It's not
completed
duck.
for me. Yeah. So
Can
but
you talk to
uh,
my messaging?
yeah.
Yeah.
But in my act, I've kept it pretty clean and pretty light, and yet I've got heavier stuff and I've got more social commentary that I think I could do, but it doesn't fit into my persona right now. So, the fact that you are working towards that and I'm kind of working towards the same thing, I think that's pretty cool.
Well, and what's a shame too now is when you talk about being a clean comic, not only does that mean, oh, don't curse, don't be overtly sexual, it goes into like politics. Like it's basically like
Yeah.
don't have an opinion, don't have a stance. Um, but then it's interesting because I've seen clean comics who get, a dry bar special and they spend a lot of their set making fun of their wife.
Mhm.
And I was like, so I guess misogyny is okay.
Yeah.
But me telling you that I get sexualized on the internet and that I get unsolicited dick pics, that's somehow
Uh-huh.
my fault and I shouldn't talk about that.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
irritating. But look, it is what it is. I think that what's really nice, I mean, you can sit there and talk about the negative, but what's really great is the internet has allowed people to not have to deal with that type of gatekeeping. They can put their content out there, and if people like it, they like it. And if they want to
Right.
be fans, they can be fans and they can choose. Whereas before it literally was, do I get booked at this club? Do I
Mhm.
get to do a late night? And even late night has become racier,
Yeah. Yeah,
which I
it's
like.
yeah, and I guess the only thing I look for is if it's funny. I mean, you could say anything, and if you make it funny, I'm okay with it because I can't be offended. But that's just me. Some folks can be offended really quick, and
Yeah.
but I one of the things you went through was the whole New York to Colorado thing,
Uh-huh.
and how how far were you into your comedy career before you had to go help with mom?
About 7 years.
7 years? So it
Yeah.
was you started in 2009, so it was pretty smack dab in the middle of where
Yeah.
you are now. So that I mean, that had to been a big shift because you're in a place where, if you're producing your own shows and mics and things like that, that you could pretty much do comedy twice a day, 7 days a week if you want. And Colorado, I know the Denver area is getting much more
It's great.
prolific, and even
Yeah.
Boulder's getting much more
Oh,
prolific as far as comedy shows are concerned, but you went from that to that. How did that affect you?
well, fortunately, it was good on a comedic level. I think I lost the community,
Mhm.
and it's a funny thing that happened. Um, first of all, I'll say this: I didn't know there was a Denver comedy scene because anytime I came home to visit, it was usually for a long weekend. I spent
Yeah.
time with my parents, my friends, so I took a breather from comedy when I would come home and visit. So when I was moving back here, I was kind of scared. I was like, am I going to have to hang it up? Well,
Mhm.
I was already thinking, well, maybe I'll do like road gigs. Like I was trying to figure out how I could still maintain. And then, much to my delight, I got here, and the scene was great. There's mics and shows every single night,
Mhm.
um, and the the good thing that happened is I started being offered more time and actually being
Mhm.
paid. And it's funny, the first time I did 15 minutes, it was so uncomfortable. And because I'd been so used to 5 and 7, and you realize I have a ton of material actually, but then you have to cobble it together. And then you start
Mhm.
doing 20 minutes and 30 minutes and 45. And that's a different muscle,
Mhm.
and it is different when you're the headliner. You carry the show. Those,
Mhm.
whatever happens, you've got to kill it because
Mhm.
you want those people to be like, yeah, that we get why she's the headliner.
Right.
So all of that, very fortunately for me, has developed, and that's where my growth has been. Um, it is funny that I kind of earned my stripes in New York, and that didn't end up translating here as far as the community because I didn't produce shows here and I didn't produce mics. And so all that hard work, like, I just never existed to these people before. And
Mhm.
so I had somebody, it's funny, I had somebody come up to me very early on. I did a set and they were like, wow, you're pretty funny for being new to comedy.
Yeah.
Because you see, most people start here, or maybe in a smaller market, come
Yeah.
here, and then go on to New York. And I did it the other way. And it just dawned on me. I was like, I didn't exist to these people until I got here. So they don't have an appreciation for all the hard work that I put in. But I'm
Right.
going to be really honest. I already did it and I don't want to do it again.
Mhm.
I don't, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and that unfortunately I think holds me back kind of in the social aspect. I'll say it that way of the scene, but I'm okay
So
with that.
so what you're saying is you're an adult and you just don't wanna network with a bunch of 25-year-olds, for 2 hours after a mic, right?
You know what? The funny thing is I'm fine with it. It is interesting because sometimes you get that sense like, oh, she's not doing the hang, and I was like, do you want a chaperone? I'm literally probably your mother's age.
Yeah.
I'm. This isn't going to be fun for you. No, I think that, uh, and this is a compliment because I've seen that the people in this scene work very hard. They take it very seriously, and they're producing shows, they're doing mics, and um, I get why they might look at somebody like me and be like, well, all she's doing is taking spots. I
Right.
get that. I
Mhm.
100% get that. I think what they don't realize is I've done that shit.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
used to run a Monday mic in a basement that started at 9:30.
Uh,
Like, I've done it, you
yeah.
know. I don't I just have no interest in going back. I mean, I'll do, if there's a person I want to work with and there's an opportunity to produce something that I really, feel is important. I was producing a show at a theater for a little bit before COVID, that I felt was important. I wanted to really bring diversity to the
Mhm.
stage. So I do and I will produce, but I'm just saying, like, I've been there and done that.
Right, right. I know exactly how you feel because I moved to Huntsville from Northern Indiana, and in that scene, I was doing the same thing as you. I was putting on my own shows and getting people paid. It was great, and then we decided to move down here, and I've done a couple things. And I don't even know if I want to put this effort in again.
Yeah.
And I've been kind of dragging my feet between that and not knowing what kind of comedy I want to do. I've been dragging my feet about doing a whole bunch of stuff, and there was a pretty big COVID spike here
Mm,
during the last couple months, so I was always careful about that because I'm an older gentleman, and even though I'm vaccinated, I know I could still get it,
you
and
want to be careful, yeah.
I don't want to spread it around. So I was careful in that aspect too. But I really know where you're coming from, and the the one thing that they can't deny is that you're funny. So when you've performed there, people say you're funny for the first time for somebody who's doing it, who's new at it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sure as you've been down there, they're like, okay, well, she knows what she's doing, and I'm sure you probably get some time because of that.
Yeah, and look, I mean, this has always been the case. People like to book their friends.
Yeah.
There are certain jokes that are going to resonate with people more than others. I mean, I get that 25-year-olds are going to be like, "Oh, here comes Mel again with her cougar joke," um,
Mhm.
but there's also a whole group of people who love that, and they're usually the ones with more money.
Yeah.
Uh, they're they're adults, who can pay $20 and want to drink a lot. Um, you know, but and this is funny. So this is something that's been happening recently that I didn't realize. Um, because somebody had asked me, they were doing a show up in Cheyenne, and I had just headlined that show like not even a month ago, I don't think.
Mhm.
And they asked me if I would give them a ride and told me I could get a spot if I
Uh-huh.
gave them a ride. All I said, because again, as a producer, I produced, I said, ask the producer if he's okay with that because I just headlined that show. Now, you and I
Mhm.
understand what I was saying. I wasn't
Yeah.
being arrogant.
Right.
I was saying, like, that's a production thing, right?
Mhm.
And and he was like, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I know you're a headliner and I'm just offering you a spot. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is not what I'm saying at all. At all. Like, I will do tens all day long. I would love that.
Mhm.
But then it dawned on me that, like, my bookings have gone down but they are pretty much only headliner feature.
Mm,
So now I'm like, oh crap, like I need to get the word out on the street that I am totally fine doing 10-minute spots.
mm,
Like
right.
I would rather work more um than, you know, less. I don't know. And I think that's the New York hustle that's still
Mm,
there, you
right.
know. I mean, I just drove to Casper, Wyoming, which I didn't realize it's 4+ hours from Denver, to headline a brewery there.
Uh-huh.
So I think one thing you can't say about me is that I don't have a strong work ethic.
Right, right. So did you drive the 4 hours and do the set and then drive home?
No, we spent the night. We had it.
Okay, yeah,
They did provide a hotel. Yeah,
yeah. I
and it
had
was
friends
great.
up in yeah. Yeah, I had friends up in South Bend that would drive 4 hours and drive 4 hours back, and I'm way too old for that shit, so, and
See,
if they're
that's the
not
stuff I'll do. I will do
yeah,
that, if it's a good show. And it was a great show. I mean,
uh
it's a beautiful brewery in Casper. The staff, the team were so on board. Um, it was a true show. Gosh, I mean, we were somewhere between 50 and 100 people. I
mhm,
don't know what the final head count was.
yeah,
Um, and to me, that's good. I want people to know my name. I want them to be like, oh, I'll follow you on Instagram now.
mhm,
You know.
right,
So yeah, so I'll do that kind of stuff like an idiot.
yeah, yeah. One of the things that we have in common is we have a day career and we're trying to do the comedy thing. How were you able to juggle both things for so long? Because I mean, since 2009, that's a long time to be staying out late and going to work early.
Oh well, Scott, I also added that I am now pursuing a master's
Yeah.
because
Oh, there you go.
I don't like any free time or sleep,
Uh,
and pish posh on dispensable income. I'm just perpetually tired. No, I mean, I'm kind of a night owl,
mhm,
anyhow. Um, and as I've gotten older, and honestly, probably because of my dad's passing, I started to realize like, this is it. This
mhm,
is it. This is the ride that you get.
mhm,
And I will hear people say, and I'm not putting them down, but I will hear people, especially my age, say, like, oh, that's great that you're performing, but the show's at 7:30 or 8. It's a weeknight. I'm going to be really tired if I go. And, sometimes people will talk about being tired for a day like it's a terminal illness.
yeah,
And I'm just thinking to myself, like, I watched my father die, and never at any point did he say, I wish I would have gotten more sleep. you
right,
know,
right, yeah,
you just, when you watch somebody pass and go through
mhm,
that dying process, they never, no, I shouldn't say never, but you really don't hear them talk about the things like that, or I had a nice house, I had a lot of money. Like, it's about memories, it's about experiences. If it is about money, it's usually, money that provided for those things.
mhm,
Um, and I think that was really eye opening. And I was just like, okay, I'm tired. Great. I'll
yeah,
sleep on the weekend. I mean, there's just worse things in my life that I've felt and
right.
gone through than being tired.
Right. I concur with that. The whole sleep thing is overrated and you I guess and I'm older than you, but you get to a certain age and you feel like, you know, I need to pack a lot into these last
Right?
years rather than uh, everything I wasted in the first years. I need to do something to uh, balance that out because yeah, it's something, so many people that are in their 40s and 50s are just so stuck in being who they are and who they were. And they are, I mean, they work they come home, they watch TV, they go to bed, and they go
I
to a
think their
comedy show
boredom makes
once a
them
year.
tired. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I'll be honest with you. I think it's the boredom that makes them feel tired, candidly,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
because, you know, I mean, first of all, comedy is addictive, right?
Mhm.
So it's like you want to do
Mhm.
it. But then also, it's like for me, it's so satisfying and it balances out my work life. That I
Mm.
don't have kids, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is it for me. So for me, it's what gives me that work life balance. And I don't want the life balance to simply be binge watching shows and going to bed at 8:30. And I'm
Mm.
not putting that down. I'm not putting it down. I'm just saying that's not right for me. That's not
Right.
what I want. And if I died today, I promise you, I will have died knowing that I had a really cool life
Mm.
and I had really neat experiences and unique experiences, and I'm okay.
Right.
And
Right.
that's what I want. That's what's important to me.
Mhm. And I respect that because it's not easy. It's it, trying to, juggle everything, and the thing that gets me the most, and I don't know if this does you, but my day job is pretty stressful, and there's a lot on my shoulders. So when sometimes I'm going up on stage, all of a sudden, for no reason, work just goes into my brain, and it gives me a shitty set because I'm not
Yep.
thinking about the comedy part. It's really hard to turn that part of your brain off so that you can actually just relax and do the comedy.
Yeah. Oh, I've definitely had that happen where, so my day job is not 9 to 5. I don't get to just stop doing it.
Yeah.
And, I've had it where I've had to be emailing with clients or take a candidate call or whatever
Mhm.
right before I'm supposed to go up. And it it does affect you for
Mhm.
sure. Um, because I like to get in the zone. I need to get in the zone, and you
Mhm.
can't do that when you know you're like negotiating somebody's package,
Yeah.
compensation package or whatever. Um, and if I'm being completely honest, it that it can't. So comedy can't affect work that
Mhm.
way. I can't fuck up work that way.
Right.
um, so unfortunately, comedy sometimes does have to take a hit.
Mhm.
But again, we were talking about this earlier. If the hit is, I didn't land a joke, but for me, it's more. I think just my energy is different, and I
Mhm.
I do believe in energy. Like I'm saying the same jokes. It's not like I don't know my jokes or whatever, but my energy is different, and I think the audience picks up on that.
Mhm. Mhm. And there is something to be said about not relying on comedy to be your main source of income or your complete career. I I don't know about you, but it relaxes me a little bit just knowing, whatever. If this doesn't go right, then I still got a job. I can still pay the bills. But those some of those kids get a little bit desperate sometimes, and I've seen that. The desperation of, the only thing I know how to do is be a comic, and if this doesn't work for me, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Well, and Scott, being a woman,
Yeah.
it's unsafe.
Uh.
I mean, I just had an incident where I was at a festival and, somebody asked if they could crash in my room for a night because they were just
Mhm.
down there for a night. And I said, of course, of course, of course.
Mhm.
Um, and then we were just chatting and they mentioned, well, I really didn't want to pay for a hotel room. They're pretty expensive. I was thinking maybe I would just find a date for the night. And I thought, and I'm not even a mother, but my maternal instinct kicked in immediately. And I was
Yeah.
like, you do not ever do that if I can
Uh.
help it. Like, you
Yeah.
can always stay with me. And that candidly has has definitely been part of it. Is I feel safer knowing that I have the money to get out of a bad situation.
Mhm.
Um, Also, it's given me opportunities, because let's face it, some shows don't pay shit, but you
Mhm.
want to do them. So, if I have to pay for it, I look at it as an investment, and I say I'm planning my escape from corporate America because at this, again, I started in my mid 30s, so
Mhm.
I'm not naive about this stuff. I
Right.
It's going to be a different career path for me and a different journey. So I basically want to be Betty White,
Yeah.
but not like the front part of her career. Just, I just want to be like a funny old lady who can tell people to fuck off.
Uh-huh.
And then they say thank you because you're so adorable. Uh, but I'm not kidding. Like, I literally want to get to a point where, I've got that nest egg and I can write and I can, invest in my my friends who are doing this. I
Mhm.
mean, I would love that. I would love to invest. A friend of our, or somebody on the scene, just opened a comedy club that is phenomenal. And,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't have it like that quite yet, but my point is I absolutely want to keep doing this, but I want to branch out, and I think if
Mhm.
I can do it and also invest in it monetarily, nothing would give me greater joy.
Right, right, right. That's a really good path. It I haven't asked this question in a while. What's your, favorite what's the best moment you've had as a comedian
Oh
on
gosh.
stage?
Oh my goodness. Um, I mean, I've had a few. Um, I think some of the more recent stuff. Uh, so in 2019, I was producing a show in Brooklyn with a really good friend of mine who I adore. And we were taking proceeds from that show and contributing to a kind of after school or outside of school coding program for underprivileged kids.
Mhm.
And so that was super fulfilling, both comedy wise, because we had these amazing audiences. I was back in my hometown, and so it fulfilled me comedically from a craft standpoint. I got to book the show, so I got to do comedy with some of my favorite comics and bigger names. And then to know that on the back end, and we went to Philly and we got to meet some of the kids and their families who we were helping.
Mhm.
And a lot of it was my friend. Her
Mhm.
name's Chandra Daniels, and she's an amazing networker and just an amazing human being. And like, she got a corporate sponsor who had come to our show
Mhm.
and was like, oh my gosh, I love this, and gave them 10 computers. I mean, that to me um, encompassed everything that I want to do with
Mhm.
comedy. It's like I
Mhm.
want to make people laugh. I want to feel good about it. I want to have good sets. I want to be able to work with people I look up to. And then I want to be able to use the platform to do good outside of just comedy and outside of just building my own bank account and my own career.
Right, right. That's, that's a good story. I mean, there's nothing better than knowing that you were able to contribute to, the betterment of folks who need it, and, that's that's really a good story. My story of doing a charity show was, I did one for the Humane Society up in, South Bend, and it was one of those shows where they were doing music and comedy, and they had 2 levels. There was people downstairs playing music and people upstairs doing comedy,
Oh
and
boy.
I think I did 15 or something like that, and I don't think that one person listened to one joke. They were just all talking. It was just like
Yeah.
a it wasn't geared towards comedy at all. So that's actually one of my worst moments, but at least we made some money for the Humane Society, so that was great. Um,
Yeah,
so
those are
thinking
tough
about
shows.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
done
yeah.
those.
Yeah, yeah, it's not fun at all. I do like to do music open mics though, because they give you more time, and if you can
Oh,
win a
yeah?
musical crowd over, then you're doing pretty good. So,
You
yeah.
know, I've never done that, so now I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and some of them say their mix will take anybody, you could do slam poetry or whatever, but, most of them are just if you go and you're not doing comedy, it's all music, and I used to do one that was so set up for music, I couldn't even hold the mic. The mic was, like, bolted in a stand so that it would go to the right
Right.
height of the person playing guitar or fiddle or whatever. So yeah,
Oh my
it's
goodness.
interesting doing that. So thinking about where you're at, what do you think is the best and worst advice you got coming up being a comedian?
Um, I think I think some of the most important advice I got was in the very beginning, um, because it actually was bigger than what maybe this person even intended. But
Mhm,
you know, you see yourself a certain way, right? Everybody, you just kind of have a way that you see yourself. And I have a very self deprecating sense of humor. And
mhm,
I was doing jokes about, dating, and they were kind of like based on, oh, because I look like this.
mhm,
And somebody pulled me aside and they were like, that's not going to work. And I'm like, why? And, and I say this with zero arrogance, but they were like, look, the reality is, if somebody's looking at you on stage and you're like, oh, well, I can't get a date because of how I look, they're going to be like, that's bullshit.
mhm,
You're going to get creepy guys who will be like, I'll take you out. you know? Um, and, but the reason I say it was great advice is that it set off a light bulb of, I need to understand what the audience sees,
mhm,
what I'm, giving off, how I look. Like it really kind of hit me like a hammer. You're a performer. You're not Monica on stage.
mhm,
You're Mo Vida. And, again, I'm not a persona. Like
mhm,
I don't have a character that I'm doing, but I definitely give thought to my brand, I guess is a way to say it. And it also made me realize like, oh, well, if I can make friends with the women in the audience, then that will give permission, if you will, for their boyfriends and husbands to laugh at me too.
mhm,
So that whole like gender, um, what do you look like, and not in uh, a superficial way of what you look like, but understand what people are seeing,
mhm,
understand what you're putting out there. And that came very early on, and I'm certainly very appreciative of it
mhm.
because that just completely changed how I was thinking about jokes and what I needed to do on stage. I still sucked, but they were like, listen, if you go up there and you're like, I'm really neurotic, or I'm not a fun person to date, or I can't cook, and whatever, like stuff that people can't question because they don't know you
Uh-huh,
versus stuff they can see, right? So that I thought was really good advice. I don't know that it's the worst advice. It's the advice I don't like, which is don't reveal your age on stage.
mhm,
I don't like that. I don't like being told to not do that.
yeah,
I think it's really important that people know that there is a 47-year-old woman up there doing this.
uh-huh, and it it only affects women. That's another thing. Nobody cares
More
how
so
old a
for
guy
sure.
is. Yeah.
Definitely more so. I mean, I do see ageism just across the board,
Uh-huh,
but boy, it really is much more. I will say this. I think women get told that more.
uh-huh.
you know I think it affects both genders, but I think women are the ones that get told, "Shh, don't say age. Don't,
Uh-huh.
you know? And I'm like, why?
Right.
Why wouldn't I? I mean, first of all, it's not like you're going to look at me and think that I'm way younger than I am.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you can tell, you can get a sense that I'm in my 40s. I mean,
Mhm.
and then also I have jokes about that, and I'm like, well, don't take away my jokes because again, they're important to me, and I
Mhm.
think frankly they're important to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Those are the things that resonate.
Mhm.
That's the reason women my age come up to me.
Mhm.
So
Okay,
I don't
this
like that.
might go a little bit long because you hit a hot
Oh,
button, ageism. So,
uh-oh.
t tell me your experience with ageism without naming names and all that kind of stuff. Tell me your experience.
Well, look, I mean, I just think that it exists in this world in general. I candidly think I'm pretty fortunate, in part because of my day job, in part because I do this, that I can navigate it more positively. But, it's just, I mean, a big one is social media, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, a lot of these younger comics are just killing it on social media. They
Mhm.
understand how to do it. They want to do it. I mean, that's the thing. I'm from a generation where you didn't want to put everything out there.
Right.
And because of my job, I realize people don't get jobs because of what's out there.
Yeah.
So for me, I really struggle with that, and that's absolutely a generational thing, right?
Mhm.
Um, I mean, look, not that I was up for girl code, but it's very clear. Like, I'm never going to get booked for anything on MTV or, any of
Mhm.
that stuff. So I mean, that's kind of the ageism that I've dealt with. The funny thing is, it's been more about, like, I've been called a whore because of the jokes that I tell.
Mhm.
And it's funny because I don't I don't talk about my sex life in like intricate detail on stage. I talk about
Mhm.
the stuff that happens. I talk about society sexualizing me.
Mhm.
Um, so I feel like I've dealt with more of the gender thing than the age thing, other than the very obvious stuff that I'll just never even get considered for certain things.
Right. Right. I see a little bit of the ageism, but it's one of those things that doesn't apply to men as much as it does to women.
I think it
And
applies to men, but I think it applies to men at a later age. So I think
uh,
men get a pass
uh,
through, I'm going to say their 50s.
yeah,
Women start to struggle in their like mid 30s for
yeah,
sure.
oh yeah, yeah. I can see that, and the humor has to. It's it's weird because if you are performing with four other 20 somethings, you just know there's going to be four eating ass jokes, and then you come up and do your thing. And
Yeah.
smart young people know that at the very least we're a palate cleanser. So
I
we're
like how
gonna
you're like ass eating palate cleanser.
yeah, yeah. We're gonna we're gonna be different, and
Yeah.
it's gonna satisfy the people in the audience that are of a certain age, and it, it, w- sometimes it's a plus. I mean, I've been booked on stuff just because I'm the only old guy, so it
Yeah.
have to have a token old guy. And so yeah, that was it can be a positive, it can be a negative too. To get really in the scene, you the youngsters are the gatekeepers so many times, and they're just not confident enough in themselves to let somebody that's twice their age come and play.
Yeah. And that is absolutely a struggle that I've had on this scene because in New York, again, a lot of people have been doing it a lot longer. It's kind of the mecca for stand-up comedy. So you have stand-up comics who are more your age, also. And it's
Hmm.
not all just really young people, but here it's mostly 20s, early 30s, and then,
Mhm.
I'm like 10 or 15 years older, in some cases 20 years older than these
Mhm.
guys. Um, you know, and I love them. I like hanging out with them. I have no issues. But there's just a reality to it. I mean, my life is so different than their life.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, age
Yeah.
is fun. Hey, I'm glad I'm alive.
I I I dig it. I dig it. And, I I'm feeling more comfortable talking about the issues that women face now because I think 8 out of my last 10 interviews have been women. So
Oh, okay.
uh, I'm easing myself into being a feminist and a spokesperson for women because I didn't feel like it was my place to talk about it. Then I had 2 comics that, had gone through, sexual harassment and stuff like that, in comedy, and they said I absolutely should be talking about it, and
Yeah.
because the only
And you can be
people
an
that
ally.
the only
If
people that
you're a good
listen to
person, you're an ally.
yeah, and people aren't going to listen to women talking about what they're going through, but they'll listen to a guy talk about it. So here I am talking about it again. So
Well, we appreciate you. I mean, yeah, it's a very weird thing where some men get really, yeah, I don't know, it's so weird. Like they get very defensive, which always makes me wonder. I'm like, why are you defensive about this?
mhm,
And then I wonder, do you have no women in your life? And I mean that very genuinely. Like,
mhm,
do you not talk about this with your mother or your daughters or your sisters? And I'm not talking about like, hey, mom, what kind of sexual harassment, but just even being aware of, well, you know, when I was a young woman, I couldn't get a credit card without without your dad signing on for it. I mean,
mhm.
there's such important conversations, and I don't know why we still treat it like it's a junior high school dance, and it's like boys over
Yeah.
here, girls over here. I don't get that.
Yeah, yeah, it's weird, and it's weird how the same stuff that happened, back then is still happening even though there's so much more awareness about it. People
Yeah,
just
but I
I
will
guess they
say
can't
this
change.
too, really quickly. I really want to be somebody on the scene who like the younger women comics can feel like they can come to me and have an ally, and I want, while I think it's important to have these conversations and make men understand what's happening, I also want women to feel stronger. I want
Mhm,
them to be more, not just vocal on in a Facebook group. I I want them to feel like it's okay to say no. I mean, you if you intimidate a bully and you push back on them, more often than not, you figure out they're more fragile than anybody else in the
oh, yeah.
group. It can be dangerous, so you need that gut instinct. But I'm just
Mhm,
saying, like, I really want us to be strong.
right, right. Well, this has been great. I know we went down a few different tangents there, but, that
That's
means
what
it's a
it's
good
about.
one, so yeah, so I appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah,
If,
thank you.
folks want to find you, and what you're doing, what's the best way?
I pretty much post everything on Instagram, either in my story, usually in my stories.
Mhm.
So in across social media, I'm at Mocha Vida. So that's at MOKAVIDA. And that's the best. You'll see what I'm up to.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. This was great. It was really
Yeah.
nice to meet you.